DNA analysis reveals the real reason Neanderthals went extinct. For most of human history, Neanderthals were treated like a mystery buried in stone. They were described as primitive, slow, and somehow inferior to early modern humans, a simple story that made extinction feel obvious. But modern DNA analysis has completely broken that idea apart. What scientists are discovering now is far more complex and honestly far more unsettling in a scientific sense. Neanderthals did not simply vanish because they were less advanced. Their disappearance was the result of overlapping forces, climate instability, interbreeding, competition, disease, and population collapse over thousands of years. In other words, it was not a sudden extinction event, it was a long, slow disappearance written into their genes. Homo neanderthalensis. Neanderthals lived across Europe and parts of Western Asia for hundreds of thousands of years, long before modern humans arrived. For a time, they were incredibly well adapted to their environment. Thick bodies, strong muscles, and cold-resistant biology made them perfectly suited for Ice Age conditions. But DNA evidence extracted from ancient bones tells a different story about their final phase. Instead of a sudden collapse, scientists see shrinking populations, reduced genetic diversity, and increasing isolation between groups. This matters because small populations become extremely vulnerable over time. Even small changes in climate or food supply can push them toward irreversible decline. Genetic studies show that by the time modern humans entered their regions, Neanderthals were already under pressure. One of the most important discoveries came when researchers first successfully sequenced Neanderthal DNA. It revealed something unexpected: modern humans and Neanderthals interbred. This means extinction was not a clean replacement, but a merging of populations. Today, many humans outside Africa still carry around 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA. That single fact changes the entire narrative. Instead of being completely replaced, Neanderthals were partially absorbed into modern human populations. Some scientists describe this as a form of genetic disappearance rather than total extinction, because their biological legacy still exists inside us today. But DNA also shows something more troubling for Neanderthals. Their populations were extremely small compared to early modern humans. At certain points, estimates suggest Neanderthals may have existed in fragmented groups of only a few thousand individuals across an entire continent. That kind of genetic bottleneck leads to inbreeding, reduced fertility, and weaker immune diversity. It is not a dramatic extinction event, but a slow weakening over thousands of years. When modern humans arrived in large, more connected populations, the imbalance became even more significant. Homo sapiens. Early modern humans had a major advantage that DNA helps explain more clearly today. Their populations were larger, more mobile, and more genetically diverse. That diversity mattered in ways early scientists underestimated. It meant better resistance to new diseases, more flexible adaptation to changing climates, and stronger survival rates in unstable environments. When Neanderthals and modern humans interacted, it was not just competition for land or resources. It was also a biological competition between two populations with very different genetic strengths. Over time, even small advantages in survival and reproduction can completely reshape population outcomes. Another major factor revealed by genetic research is disease transfer. When two previously separated human groups come into contact, pathogens often move faster than people expect. DNA comparisons between Neanderthals and modern humans suggest that both groups likely exposed each other to unfamiliar diseases. For Neanderthals, who had smaller populations and less genetic diversity, this could have been devastating. Climate also played a silent but powerful role. Ice Age Europe was not stable. Temperatures shifted dramatically over relatively short periods, changing ecosystems, migration patterns of animals, and availability of food. The evidence shows that Neanderthal populations contracted during harsher climate phases. They were already living close to environmental limits, so even moderate changes could disrupt their survival strategies. Meanwhile, modern humans had broader survival networks and more varied diets, giving them resilience during environmental stress. Another surprising insight from genetic analysis is that Neanderthals were not isolated or static. They adapted and changed over time, but their rate of adaptation may have been slower due to small population size. Evolution depends heavily on variation. With fewer individuals, fewer beneficial mutations appear, and harmful traits can become more common. DNA from different Neanderthal fossils shows signs of inbreeding in some regions, suggesting that groups were not always able to mix freely across territories. That isolation slowly reduced their long-term survival potential. Denisovans. Adding another layer of complexity is the existence of Denisovans, a closely related human group identified entirely through DNA. Evidence shows that Neanderthals, Denisovans, and modern humans all interbred at different times. This creates a picture of ancient human populations that were not separate species in the strict sense, but overlapping branches of a complex family tree. In some regions, Neanderthals may have competed with both modern humans and Denisovans simultaneously, creating pressure from multiple directions. Genetic overlap also means that traits were constantly being exchanged, diluted, or lost over time. One of the most debated ideas in modern research is whether Neanderthals were actually outcompeted or simply absorbed. DNA suggests both processes happened at the same time. In some regions, Neanderthal genes disappear completely over time, indicating population replacement. In other regions, their genetic material survives within modern humans, indicating assimilation. Another important finding from DNA is that Neanderthal brain development genes differ subtly from modern humans. These differences may have influenced cognition, social behavior, or learning patterns, but not in a simple smarter or dumber way. Instead, they suggest different developmental pathways. However, because culture and technology evolve faster in larger populations, modern humans may have developed more rapidly expanding tools, language complexity, and social networks. Archaeological evidence combined with DNA also shows that Neanderthals were not static cave dwellers. They used tools, controlled fire, created art in some cases, and adapted to harsh environments with impressive skill. The idea that they were primitive has been largely rejected. Instead, the focus has shifted to understanding why two intelligent human groups with overlapping abilities ended up with only one surviving line. The most realistic explanation emerging from modern genetics is that Neanderthal extinction was a layered process. Small populations faced environmental stress, increasing competition, intermittent disease exposure, and gradual absorption into expanding modern human groups. Over time, their distinct identity diluted, not because they suddenly disappeared, but because they merged, shrank, and fragmented until they no longer existed as a separate population. What DNA analysis ultimately reveals is something far more human than the old version of the story. Neanderthals were not a failed experiment. They were part of a broader human ecosystem that changed over time. Their extinction was not a single moment of disappearance, but a long process of integration and decline shaped by biology, environment, and chance. And in a strange way, their story did not fully end. It continues in modern humans, written quietly into our genetic code, showing that extinction is not always an ending. Sometimes it is just transformation across time.